Hearing me or seeing anything, please just use the question or the chat, and Dee Dee will be monitoring that throughout the presentation. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. Today we're going to talk about accounts receivable in Sage 100, and I'm going to just kind of cover some areas based upon either questions that come up during technical support, things that seem to require a little more focus when we do training or implementations. So hopefully you'll find this presentation informative and you will learn something new and have something to take away today. So to get started in accounts receivable, I thought I would spend a few minutes actually looking at the setup of the accounts receivable module. And in accounts receivable under setup, you have your AR options, and these are set up in the very beginning when you implement the Sage 100 software. So maybe you're new to the position, or you're wondering, well, I wonder why Sage does this, or why doesn't it do that, because my previous software used to be able to do it a certain way. And it could very easily just be how you have things set up in the module. You just need to uncheck or check a box and it will take care of that functionality. So what I wanted to take a look at was on the additional tab. I wanted to show you where the aging categories are set up. So we all run aging reports to take, keep track of who's past due, who owes us money, and typically your aging category is 30, 60, 90, and 120 days. However, if your business offers different terms, maybe your terms are net 15, and you want to track people that the aging categories are 15 days, 30, 45, and 60, all you have to do is just change this feature, change the numbers, and it will then actually manage your aging the way you have this set up. So if I accept it, I go in and run my aging report. It will actually recalculate the aging on all of my customers, and it will base it based on these aging categories. You also can age your invoices by the due date. You can also age them by the invoice date. So maybe you actually have no terms. It's net due upon receipt, so you may want to run your aging report and track your aging by the invoice date rather than the actual due date. And the other thing that you can do, and I don't actually see many people ever doing this anymore, but you can actually change that aging category to month instead of days. So if you notice, if I change it to month, it changes the default down here to 1, 2, 3, and 4 months. But if you notice, I cannot click in here and change it. So I don't have any options with the default if I select month, but if I do select days, then I have the option. Now you'll notice how it reverted back to what I had a few minutes ago. That's because when I changed it, I did not click accept. But once you change those days and click accept, it will then maintain those aging categories. So I did want to point that out to you. The other thing that I wanted to just show you quickly was the credit tab. And to make you aware that you can set up credit limits for your customers. So, and you can have it check the credit limit in various ways. If you're going in to enter a new invoice, if you use the sales order module and you're entering in a sales order, you can try to do a new order that's going to be over $1,000, it will give you a warning about the credit limit. Okay. I just got a warning that said there were some audio issues. So if anybody is experiencing any audio or video issues, will you please send a chat to Dee Dee?
Pam, it's
yes.
Dee Dee. I actually have a question. How do you prevent zero balances to not show up on the aged AR report?
Okay, we're going to be talking about the aged invoice report and the trial balance in a little bit. So let me make a note of that, and we'll be talking about that. So you don't.
Okay.
So they're asking how to have zero balance invoices not show up on the AR report.
On the aged AR report, correct.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
I do have that on the list. Thank you. So anyway, so those are just a couple of things that I wanted to show you in the accounts receivable options. Now, what a lot of companies do is they kind of lock down these options so that not everyone can arbitrarily go in and make changes to some of the settings. So if you try to get into the options and it says you don't have permissions, then you may want to talk to your manager or supervisor and see about getting your security or your privileges changed if you do need to get into the options. So just wanted to spend a couple of minutes on that, and then I'm actually going to take you in and show you where you can assign a credit limit to a customer if you're wanting to manage the credit limit. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of here, and I'm just not going to save the changes. So the next thing we're going to look at, we're going to go back in the main menu in accounts receivable, and we're going to go to customer maintenance. And anybody that uses AR is very familiar with customer maintenance, and this is basically where you're setting up your demographic information for your customer and where it's tracking all of the information about invoices, their history, and all of that information. And just to step back just a couple of minutes, a lot of times I get questions from people that are asking about, well, you know, we do our billing through sales order. We don't really use AR. Well, everybody, if you do any billing at all out of Sage, you technically do use AR because that's where the customer master file and your customer maintenance is managed. You may do all of your invoicing out of sales order, and people that have inventory typically do all their billing out of sales order because they want that to then you know, take out of their inventory count when they sell something. So the real difference most of the time between when you bill out of AR versus when you bill out of sales order is really related to inventory. If you're a service business, you don't have inventory, then you're typically going to bill out of the accounts receivable module. So I wanted just to kind of explain the difference there. So if you have AR, you do not have to have the sales order module, but if you have the sales order module, you do have to have accounts receivable because that's the accounts receivable module. So if we're looking at the main tab in our customer maintenance, we'll see down here at the right that, or yeah, the bottom right, where we have a credit limit. So this is where you can go in and issue a credit limit for a particular customer. Now, if you are not tracking credit limits based on the setup options that I just showed you, then this is really just for informational purposes, and it's not going to pop up any warnings. It's not going to limit additional invoices or sales orders based on their credit limit and their outstanding balance or what they have on order. The other thing that you can do is you'll see where this says credit hold. So let's say that you have a customer that is past due, maybe they're in collections, and you want to make sure that your sales team, you know, doesn't sell them anything else. Or if they call in for a quote, you know, you don't want them to be able to do that. You also can put customers on credit hold. And literally it's just by checking a box, and then if they get their account up to date, then you can just go back in and uncheck that box. So with that, we're going to now move to the additional tab, which is the second tab. And a lot of people don't even come into this area, but just kind of briefly, I wanted to show you a couple of things. You can, on the right side of the screen is where you have a field called sort, and you have a customer type. These are, you'll notice there's no drop down, so you can't really, keep track of the different sort types and the different customer types that you have. But this is an additional way to sort reports. So if you're printing a customer listing, you can have it print in customer number order. You can have it print by name. You could say, I only want to print customers that, begin with the letter A. You could also say, I only want to print customers that have a sort type equal to AMER, or a customer type that's equal to A2. Now, I'm not sure in my demo data exactly what those, the definitions of those are. I've seen people want to track their wholesale customers versus retail. So they would use a sort field for wholesale and then have a different description for retail, so they could manage the reporting that way. And you can do the same thing with customer type. Now, you don't have as many characters in the customer type field as you do in the sort field, but that's what those are there for. It's literally different ways to manage and sort reports out of your Sage 100. And then the next thing that you have is you have statement cycle and done message. And it seems like a lot of our clients got away from sending statements for a while, but I'm finding now that more and more clients actually do print monthly statements to send out to their customers. So when you go in to print an invoice, or excuse me, when you go in to print a statement, you can pick a particular cycle that you want to print. Typically, people will do things, maybe they have a customer that says, we really need, because of the nature of our business, we need a statement on a weekly basis. But the rest of your customer base only needs them on a monthly basis. What you can do is literally say a statement cycle M means I want the customer to get a statement monthly, and if it's W, I want to be them on a weekly basis. So when you go in to print customer statements, it will ask you what statement cycle you want to print. So if you have weekly and monthly, maybe the first week of each month you print all your statements. So you might say that it is your all statement cycles, or you could say that it's weekly and monthly, W and M. And then the next 3 weeks of the month when you go in, you would say the statement cycle is equal to, and then just have it be W for weekly. So you can identify those statement cycles however you want to, but it is, I believe, only a single character that you can use. You can also obviously print by customer number, customer name. You have a lot of other options down here as well on how you want to print your statements. But that is what the so we'll go back here. So that's what the statement cycle does. And then a done message, there's an area in your Sage where you set up your done messages, and what that would be is you could have a standard statement that prints on, or a standard text box that prints on all of your customer statements that says, we really appreciate your business. And then you could have a box that says, if this customer 3-day aging range, you have a message. If they have any invoices that fall in the 60-day aging category, your account is past due, please send payment. And then, your 90-day category and your 120-day category, you have a message for each of those. So when you do statements, if you have done messages set up, it will look at the oldest aging category of their open invoices, and that's the message that they will print. Now, the reason you have the option here to say whether or not you want to print a done message, let's say that your company does business with your brother's company, and you don't want to put a nasty message on the statement to your brother that says, hey, your account's 120 days past due, we're getting ready to turn you over to collections. So you can just uncheck that box, and when you generate a statement for ABS, it will do the normal statement, it just will not print the applicable done message on that statement. So that's what that category is for. Okay. Dee, do we have any questions at this point?
Hold on just a moment here. Yes, we have a new question. Is there a way to print statements when you want several customers only? For example, can you go to the statement printing and print 5 random customer statements without categorizing them?
So you want statements on 5 particular customers that are in no particular order. So and they can chime in on the chat. So I'm assuming they wouldn't have a common sort or a common customer type. You just want to print a statement for 5 particular random customers.
She's saying yes.
Okay. And so with that, let me ask another question. Is that typically how they print statements, is they only pick and choose? Maybe they don't send statements to everybody, but there's about 5 customers that they want to send every month. So
they haven't answered that. No, here we go. She said, no, we use the customer type box typically.
Okay. Okay. So, and let me know if I'm not answering your question, because I'm going to give you 2 different options. If you only send statements to certain customers, and it's fairly consistent, then you could use the sort or the customer type. You know, you could actually use a customer type that was STMT for statement. If it's just random, basically your options would be, give me just a second here, is that when you go into customer number, you would have to really do them one at a time and do an equal to. And then select the first customer and print it, and then the second customer and print it. Another option that just came to mind, and I don't know how difficult this would be, but we could certainly check with like Karen or William. Another thought is that we could create a user-defined table if you have custom Office and have it populate with all of your customer numbers, and then your user-defined field would be listed as one of the select fields, and then it may let you select multiple customers instead of having to do a range or a one-off. So that might be a way to do it as well. If you're a company that typically you don't send statements, but you have 5 customers that every month you want them to get a statement, then basically what you're going to do is on all of the customers that you do not want them to get a statement, you're basically going to just blank out that statement cycle. And on the customers that you do want to get a statement, you could put in M for monthly or whatever identifier that you wanted. And then when you go to print statements, you would just say that the cycle is equal to blank, and then it will just print those for you. So does that answer their question, Dee Dee?
She says yes, thank you. I have one other
right.
question. Do you want it now, Pam, or do you want it later?
Sure. If it's regarding statement printing or something, yes, now is fine.
Well, it's not really regarding that.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead and let me know, and I'll make a note of it.
What is the box marked Internet Enabled? She says it's on the AR customer maintenance page on the left upper corner side.
Yes. The Internet Enabled is if you are using there used to be a product called e-business manager, and forgive me for not knowing if that still exists, but you could enable through e-business manager where clients could see their invoices, their balances, they could pay. It was more of like a website or a shopping cart integration where clients could check their information. There's also, if they're using a Sage Cloud product to kind of help with invoicing, that we can do that as well. If you will, Dee Dee, before we finish, if you can just make a note of who asked that question, because it's kind of a lengthy answer, I will be glad to follow up and send them more information about that.
Okay.
If they would like.
That sounds great.
Okay. Okay. All right. So we talked about the printing, and I'm going to just kind of go through a couple of things really quickly, just on the maintenance screen. But for all of your customers, you have a summary tab. Let me go back to one that should have more data. Okay. So you have a summary tab where you can pull up a particular fiscal period and year, and then it will show you the period to date and year to date and prior. And it gives you, just kind of a broader look. And also, I think if you're just using AR and you're not integrated and you're not using sales order, it's not going to track the cost of goods sold and that type of thing, because you're really not tracking that if you're just using the AR. On the history tab, it gives you a little bit different look than the summary, and it breaks it down on a period by period basis. And then on the right, you'll see that you can go in and select a different year if you want to. So you could go back and look to see, how did things look in 2018 versus how they look in 2020, and see that information. On the invoices tab, you're obviously going to see your invoices. And if you click on an invoice, you're also going to see any transactions that have been made against that. So any cash receipts or anything, they're going to show up down below there. But on the transaction tab, it actually shows all of the information. Instead of by invoice, it basically shows it mostly by transaction date, or you can sort it by any of these fields. And that's one thing, actually, I apologize. I should let you know that any of the screens that you're looking at in Sage that have different headers, different columns, if you'll notice on this trans date, which is the transaction date, you have this little down arrow. That means this screen is sorted on the transaction date. If I wanted to sort it by invoice number, I'm just going to click on the invoice number field, and you'll notice how it moves the little arrow over there. And you can sort in ascending or descending order on any of these. On invoice balance, I could sort it by the balance, and again, in either the lowest balance or the highest balance. And then the sales order tab, basically, if you're using the sales order module, will show you if you have any open sales orders open for that customer. So if you don't have any questions about that, I'm going to show you one more thing in customer maintenance. And this is something that I think is so helpful to be able to use, and we use it internally. And whenever I'm setting anyone up with AR, I always encourage them to use the feature, which is this little notepad right here, which is the memo field. So you can set up multiple memos on your customers, and you can pick and choose what you might have the need based on your business for the memo to be. It is a great tool for managing your collections. And just to show you briefly, if you'll notice this little memo pad is yellow with like a little red outline, that is my indication that I actually have at least one memo code set up for ABF. If I look at another customer, see how this one is blank and it's all just kind of white? There are no memos that exist for that customer. So what we would do is, let me go back and just give you the sample here. Okay, the two samples that they have for this particular customer is they had a memo called invoicing policy, so maybe your vendor has special requirements on how they want to be invoiced, and also on credit checking. What I'm going to show you is how we manage collections and how easy that can be. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Create a New Memo, and you can call it Collect. One of the things, how we do it internally, is we actually use the year, so that any collection calls that are made in 2016, each customer would have a code called 2016. And then if someone was called last year, there would be a separate memo code called 2015. So you can do it however you want, but I'm going to use just Collect so that I can show you how I would manage this. And the thing that you want to do is whatever scheme you want to use for naming that collection memo code, it needs to be consistent for all of your customers, so that when you're running reports on these memos, you can easily pull in a report with your collection history. So I'm going to then just give it a little description. And it's going to default my memo date to today's date, which is fine because I'm going to pretend like today's the first time that I've called this customer. And then I'll show you what I do if they don't send me a payment and they have to call back. So let's say I like to still go in and put in the date because this is a running text box. So I call Pam about this invoice, and she tells me she's going to put a payment in the mail today. So today's the 20th. If she mails it today, I think I should have it by Friday. So I'm going to put in a reminder date of Friday, and then I'll give a little bit of a buffer and maybe, give it till Monday. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to click Accept. And if I go in now and look at the memos on this customer, you will see that I also have one called Collect, so that I can keep track of that. So I get through my week, I've made my calls, and next Monday I want to take a look at, who promised that they were going to send me payments last week. So in Accounts Receivable, if I go under Reports, there is a Customer Memo Printing Report, and I'm going to pull that up. And I'm going to say, okay, I want to look at any memo code that is equal to Collect, because that's what I call all of my collection memos. And if it has a reminder end date, I'm going to do a range between, we'll say, today and next Monday. And I want the detail to be listed on this report. and I'm going to just preview this. If I have anything that falls within that selection, it will bring it up. And obviously I just set up one customer, but if I had 40 customers that fell within that range, it's going to bring up this information. So let's say that they don't make the payment, and I have to call them again next week. What I'm going to do is I will go back into their customer record. I will give them a call, and I'm going to bring up the collection call. And then what I like to do, and this is just a personal preference, if I call them, let's say on the 27th, is that I like my notes to be the most recent at the top, and, you know, called again, whatever. The other thing that you can have do, and then I could, you know, if they promise me a new payment, I could set in a new reminder date. I might make a note. They requested a copy of the invoice and I sent it to them. I might make a note that I've informed them that if we don't receive the payment by the 1st of next month, that they're going to be placed on credit hold. You know, whatever you want to put in there as far as the notes are concerned. You can also, where this says auto display, you can have it display, if you say always, anytime I go into this customer, it's going to pop up that memo so that I can see it, that there's a collection issue. You may or may not want to do that depending on how many memos you have, because it's an extra click. So it's going to pop up, you're going to have to click out of that screen then to get into your customer maintenance. You can also have it come up based on reminder date. So again, that's just a personal preference if you want it to populate when you go into that customer, when you're, you know, going to do an invoice for them or anything of that nature. So I could change my reminder date and then run the report next week. So just, and then just click out of here. But that report, so let's say you have someone in your organization that's responsible for making the collection calls. You can also run that report just to kind of take a look and see what calls were made and to make sure that they're following up with the customers as they need to. Again, you can use this for anything else that you think might be applicable. Let's say that this account gets really far behind, and unfortunately you have to turn it over to collections, and the collection agency, your attorney or whomever, sends them a letter and they forward you a copy of that letter. You can also, within any memo code, you can attach a document. So you could actually just browse out to your server or your local workstation and also attach that document as well. So there are memo codes in most every place, I guess, in Sage. So you have it for vendors, you have it for general ledger, inventory, in your inventory maintenance, many different places where you can have those memo codes set up. But today I wanted to focus on the ones for accounts receivable and just show you a great way to manage your collections. I see a lot of people that they run their aging report, they make calls and they make little notes all over their aging report. Then the next week they run the aging report again, see who hasn't paid, then they rewrite all those little notes so that they know what happened last time. So this is can be much more effective and save you a lot of time.
Pam? There's a question regarding memos. The question is, can you show us how to customize the memo to only show up in certain features?
Yes.
Thank you.
And I think I know what they're referring to. And bear with me because they've moved this a couple of times. And I want to make sure that I look in the right spot. Okay. in accounts receivable under setup, it seems to me that there's a global option for this, but you can get to it from any individual module. You have memo manager maintenance, which is kind of hard to say. And then you can say, obviously, the module, the memo type. So if a memo is on, so you can in AR, you can have memos related to customers, invoices, invoice history, or repetitive invoices. So we're going to say customer. And then you pick a role, which is your security roles, you know, your user ID and roles. And then you can say which in any of these areas you want to display the memo, or your memo options if you want to maintain it, if you want to show it, or you want to hide it. And the difference between show and maintain, show means that you can see the memo, but you can't make any changes to it. It's like an inquiry. And maintain means that you can also make changes to that memo. So so the memo manager maintenance is where you manage all of that, and you can see you can get pretty granular on how you want to manage those. Okay. So hopefully that answered that particular question. So we've talked about memos. And the next thing that I wanted to show you all very briefly is, so let's say that you send out statements or you're making calls or whatever, and I'm going to say more in particular with maybe after you've sent out statements, a customer will call and say, well, I have a question about invoice, blah, 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 or can I get a copy of that invoice? Obviously, through customer maintenance, you can go in and look the customer up, then go to the invoice tab, select that invoice, and reprint it. You can also go into the invoice history inquiry, and then actually, if the customer gives you the invoice number, you can type that in, and it will actually bring the invoice up for you, and then you can reprint it from there as well. So just, you know, if you have somebody that's constantly taking calls about open invoices or invoice questions, if the customer can provide the invoice number, then you're just keying in one field rather than going into the customer maintenance, putting in their customer number, then going to another screen and then scrolling and trying to find the invoice number. So just wanted to show you that as a kind of a quick tip there. I want to get to a couple of the questions you have, and then I definitely want to talk to you about the aging versus the trial balance reports. But the other thing I wanted to mention, and just kind of briefly, but just to let you know that this functionality is there, and it's repetitive invoice entry. And repetitive invoice entry in accounts receivable, you would use this feature. Let's say that you rent office space, and you have 10 different offices, and every month, you know, you owe this, or excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm going in AP mode instead of AR mode. So let's say that you bill services to your customers. Maybe they have a monthly support plan, or maybe they have, they're renting equipment from you. And so each month you're going to bill them $1,000 for this piece of equipment that they're renting. You can set up repetitive invoices and then have each month go through and select those invoices with just kind of 1 or 2 clicks, and it will generate invoices for any of your customers that have repetitive invoicing. Now, I want to step back and say that you would do this in AR for invoices that are not related to inventory. So if you have things that you sell that are coming out of your inventory or related to inventory, you would use that in sales order. And in sales order, you have master orders and repeating orders. So that's how you would handle anything inventory. If it's more service related, you could do it right within accounts receivable. So basically, I'm going to just kind of run through this real quickly, and then if anybody has any specific questions, I can spend a little more time on it. But what you're going to do is, actually there was already one in there that was set up. Let me do a new one. Let's see. I'm just going to call this rent. That'll be easy to track. So let's say that I'm charging ABF. I'm going to bill them for rent on a monthly basis. And again, you kind of have cycles. You can identify them somewhat to how you do your statements. So what I see people, if they bill them weekly, they may use W. They may use M for monthly. They may use A or Y if they bill them once a year. They may use Q if they bill them quarterly. And you're going to tell it when you want to start billing the customer and when you want it to stop billing. So let's say that you have a one-year lease with them and you want it to stop billing in September of 2017. Then you can do that as well. We don't want to charge sales tax because it will mess up what we're doing here in this demo data. And then you're going to go to the Lines tab and then basically say what it is. You know, this defaulted to a widget. You would pick out your, let's see, we'll do just monthly maintenance billing. You can say how much it is. You're going to fill in the information, and then that's basically all you're going to do. So you're doing the data entry once. Then you're going to accept it. And then what you're going to do once a month when you're ready to generate these is you're going to go into repetitive invoice selection, and this is where you're going to, if you're using batch entry, give it a batch number, and we'll just say September, and accept. And then this is where you're going to say, I either want to do every one that has a certain cycle that is equal to M, which is what we just created. If you want to do a certain reference, if I just wanted to do the customers that had a reference that was called rent, I could do that here and say equal to rent. It also gives you the invoice date and a selection date. So the one that I just set up had a date of 9/20 to begin the billing. If that date had said October 1st, when I would go in and create this entry, it would not select them. It would not create an invoice for them because it's not October 1st yet. So once you click proceed, and anything that I had that fell into the category where the cycle was M, it's going to pull those up. So when I click proceed, basically what it has done is it created invoices in invoice data entry for me. So if I've done it properly, if I go in and look at invoice data entry, my batch should be out there, and it created, if I go to the first record, it created that invoice for me. So what you literally can do is, I'm going to close out of here. Back when I was in repetitive invoice selection and I made my selection, pick the batch since I've already created it, I could use my printer icon after I clicked proceed, and what it's going to do is it's actually then going to take me into my invoice printing. So I don't have to even go into invoice data entry and take a look at it or go into invoice printing. I can print right from here. So let's say that I goof up with my selection, and I really only wanted to do the people that had the code of rent and not everybody that was monthly. So see the clear button down here on the bottom left? If I click that, it is going to clear my repetitive invoice selection, and then I'm ready to make a new selection and start over. So it basically took those out of the invoice data entry. So if I go back and let's just say that I want to do that the reference is equal to rent and proceed. So what it has done, if I take a look, is it should have, I want to go to invoice entry and let you look at it there. It has created that invoice for me. And the other thing that it will do is, if I go back into repetitive invoice entry and pull up the repetitive invoice that I have for this client, once I go back to the line, pardon me. Once I have generated the invoice and updated it, it is going to update the last time it was billed, and it will let me know how many times it's been billed. So if you ever wondered, I can't remember if I did the repetitive invoices for September or not, you can always go in and take a look and see the last time it was billed. So I know that was a real quick run through, but if you have any questions or you think that you can actually use the repetitive invoice feature and save yourself a lot of time on a monthly basis, just give our help desk a call, and we'll be glad to help you set it up and walk you through the process. So are there any questions right now, Dee Dee? And if not, I'm going to get into the aging versus trial balance report.
Not at this time, Pam.
Okay, thank you. All right. So now they've made some improvements on the aged invoice report versus the trial balance over the past couple of versions. But we always get questions, especially when you're going through an audit. The auditors will want to know why your aging report doesn't necessarily match your trial balance, and they will tell you that they have to match. So the difference between the two is the aged invoice report pulls data based on the invoice date. The trial balance pulls data based on the transaction date, the posting date you use to post it to the GL. So an example would be if you created an invoice and the invoice date was September 30th, but when you posted that to the GL, you posted it with an October 1st date, those two reports would not match, because the aging report says that invoice was September 30th, but the trial balance, it didn't exist in your GL. So your trial balance is looking at the general ledger. So if you're ever wanting to know if your trial balance is out of balance, you would compare the individual module, the AR trial balance, to the general ledger trial balance for your AR account. That's how you can tell if there truly is an out of balance. You would have the same thing for AP in looking at that out of balance. So on your aged invoice report, they have made some changes where you can now do it by transaction date. You can put in a transaction date, but a lot of people don't use that field, or if they're on an older version of Sage, you didn't have the way to run it, the aging by a transaction date. Hope that wasn't confusing, but just keep in mind the aging is based on the invoice date. The trial balance is based on the GL posting date. So if those cross months or cross fiscal periods, there's a good chance they will not match. So I had the question earlier was, how do you keep zero balance invoices from showing on the aging? And now you might check when you go in first into your report screen and see if this include paid invoices box is checked. If it is, it includes all of the invoices, not just your open ones. So that could be one of the reasons that it's showing up on there. You also have the option to age credit memos. So if you have credit memos and invoices, you can tell it whether or not to include the credit memos. That's really up if you want to do that. You also have aging options to print. This isn't going to help with your zero balance invoices, but you could say you just wanted to run an aging report for anybody that has invoices more than 120 days past due, so that maybe you want to focus that for your collection calls. And where it has here invoices only 30, 60, 90, and 120, it's pulling that description from the setup that we looked at the very beginning of the session, where we set up our aging and said it was 30, 60, 90, and 120. Had we saved that at 15, 30, 45, and 60, that's what you would see here. You can tell it to exclude future transactions if you want to. That also has been around for the past few versions, but not forever. But I'm thinking if you have zero balance invoices that are showing up on aging, this is the first thing that I would look at, is to see if that is checked. And then basically you're going to then just print or preview that report. Can you, the person that asked that question about the aging, does that address their question? If they could just let us know. That's the only thing that I could think of off the top of my head that would show that, the zero balanced invoices, is if you're including paid invoices in the report.
They said yes, thank you. That answered the question.
Okay, great. And so I'll just kind of open this up. Does anybody have any questions about the aging versus the trial balance? If you do, just write a note to Dee Dee. And then at this point, we're just about finished with our session. That hour went by pretty quickly. So I know we just kind of touched on things, but it's just to kind of show you some things that you might not be aware of in your Sage, or you've forgotten. You know, when you implement the software, there's only so much information that you can retain at one time. I want to show you one more thing that I didn't show you in customer maintenance. So let me show you that very quickly. This is a really cool feature. And you can do this anywhere within Sage that you have a lookup, which this little magnifying glass is lookup. Another shortcut for those of us old enough to go back to the DOS days, if you do your F2, that also does a lookup. So you can either use your F2 key or you can use your little magnifying glass. But let's say that the owner comes to you and says, you know, I need a report of all of our customers that are in Indiana. You know, maybe there's something that's changed, or they just want to see all of the Indiana customers, and so they can maybe do a marketing campaign or something to them. And you're thinking, okay, well, I don't really have time to write a Crystal report, or I'm not familiar with Crystal reports, and so forth and so on. So if you do a lookup, and this is probably going to be a bad example because I don't know if we have anybody in Indiana. We probably do not, but you can create custom lookups in your Sage. So what you're going to do is you're going to click on Custom, and I'm going to say I want to create a new view, and let me think if I can come up with a better. I'm just going to highest balance. Oh, how about this? How about you want to know how long your customers, you know, when did somebody become a customer? So, customer date. I can make this my default view if I want to. If not, I just leave that unchecked. I go to Next. And then on the right, this is what is currently showing up in my view up here. And if I wanted to go down, and we will pull up date established. That's when they were set up in your Sage. You could also do things from date of last activity. You know, maybe they want a report that says, we really want to look at customers that haven't had any activity lately. We want to reach out to them. So you could bring that over if you wanted to. You could remove categories. If you didn't want to know their phone number, you could actually remove that and not have that on the sort field. You can actually then customize. So let's say that you really did want to know everybody that was in Indiana. You could do, if you had the state listed in there, you could say the state is equal to and then IN, and it will bring that up. I'm not going to put any special customization in there, and I'm just going to click Finish. And now you'll notice nothing looks different, but if I look down at my view and I click here and go to Customer Date, it now brings up that view for me to look at, and I can see the date established and their last date of activity. So again, I can sort this by different ascending or descending orders. So once I have this list, what I can do is you have a little Excel button down here. I can click on that, and what it's going to do is it is going to export this out to Excel for me. So it now took what I had on my custom lookup and exported that to Excel. So now if I wanted to add information or modify or do something a little different to the report, I could, but it is a really quick way to do a quick report or pull information. So again, anywhere that you have a lookup in Sage, you can customize how you want that lookup to be. So does anybody have any questions about that? And if not, oh, they have anything, Dee Dee?
No, not at this time.
Okay. Just wanted to add, and Dee Dee was maybe going to say this, I just wanted to add that we have a couple more webinars coming up real soon. On Thursday, I believe it is, Annette is going to do a demo of Sage 100C. And then also, I think tomorrow at 11, we're having a demo of Sage Payroll Services, which is basically the division of Sage that handles outsourced payroll, so it'd be like ADP. So if anyone has been thinking or considering outsourcing their payroll so that you don't have to keep up with all the new regulations, the ACA and so forth, we invite you to attend that. You can follow up with Dee Dee or go to our website to register. And then next week, we are going to have a demo of Sage Time, which is a cloud-based time tracking. Actually, the payroll is cloud-based. The time is somewhat cloud-based, but also it's where you can have time clocks or do manual entry or however you want to do that. So we've got lots of exciting webinars coming up, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Dee Dee. And Dee Dee, I'll be quiet so you can finish up. I think I'm stealing your thunder.
Oh, no, that's fine. Just the time and attendance is on the 27th, which is next Tuesday at 11 a.m. And like you said, Annette's webinar on Sage 100C is at 2 p.m. on the 22nd. And then tomorrow at 11 a.m. on Sage Payroll. So looks like we don't have any other questions at this time. We thank you all so much for taking time out. We hope you found this informative and that you'll join us for many more webinars. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Pam.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.